I walked into my apartment after a long shift expecting the usual quiet evening. Instead, I heard voices, laughter, the sound of furniture being moved. My keys froze in my hand as I pushed the door open wider. 3 people I barely knew were unpacking boxes like they owned the place. My wife's 2 kids, and a man I had only seen in passing, her ex-husband. They were setting up a bookshelf, hanging pictures, rearranging my furniture. Nobody looked up. Nobody explained. That was the moment I realized my marriage was built on a lie. Before I tell you how I ended up standing in my own apartment like a stranger, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt invisible in your own home. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Bartholomew. I am 32 years old, and I work as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company in Portland, Oregon. The work is steady, the pay is decent, and most importantly, it keeps me busy. I have always been the kind of person who values routine and personal space. I am an introvert by nature. I prefer quiet evenings at home over loud social gatherings. I like things organized, predictable, and under control. For the past 4 years, I had been living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment downtown. It was not luxurious by any means. The kitchen was cramped, the bathroom sink leaked occasionally, and the heating system made strange noises in winter. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every item on the shelf, every corner of that space reflected who I was. After a brutal breakup 3 years earlier, I threw myself into work and solitude. I was not looking for love. I was not looking for complications. I just wanted peace. Then about a year ago, I met Diane. It happened through one of those dating apps that everyone seems to use now. I had downloaded it on a whim, mostly out of boredom. I was not expecting much. Her profile caught my attention. She was 34, worked as a marketing coordinator, and had a warm smile in her photos. Her bio mentioned that she had 2 kids from a previous marriage. That part made me hesitate. Kids meant baggage. Kids meant complications. Kids meant a life that was already full before I even entered it. But something about her seemed genuine, so I swiped right. We matched. We started talking. Within a week, we met for coffee at a place near the waterfront. Diane was captivating in person. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, my hobbies, the kind of life I wanted to build. She laughed at my jokes, even the awkward ones. She shared stories about her job, the challenges of balancing work with parenting, and the difficulties of co-parenting with an ex-husband. But then she said something that put my mind completely at ease. Her kids lived with their father full-time. Her ex-husband, a man named Graham, had a stable job and a home where the children stayed during the week and most weekends. She only saw them occasionally, usually just for a Sunday afternoon or an overnight visit. She made it very clear that dating her would not mean stepping into a ready-made family. I would not have to worry about playing the role of stepdad. That reassurance was exactly what I needed to hear. It allowed me to relax and actually enjoy getting to know her. We dated for 8 months. We went to dinners, caught movies, took weekend trips to the Oregon coast. Everything felt natural and easy. Diane was affectionate, attentive, and considerate. She respected my need for personal space. She never pushed too hard or demanded too much. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I had found someone who understood me. When we got married at City Hall, it felt like the right decision. The ceremony was small and simple. Just the 2 of us, a couple of witnesses, and a judge. No big celebration, no family drama, no fuss. Exactly the way I preferred things. After the wedding, Diane moved into my apartment. At first, married life felt like a dream. She cooked meals that I actually looked forward to eating. She brought warmth and life to a space that had felt cold and empty for years. She was affectionate and thoughtful. She left little notes for me on the counter before she went to work. She asked about my day and genuinely seemed to care about the answer. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had made the right choice. I felt like I was building something real. Her kids, Kyle and Brittany, visited occasionally. Kyle was 15 years old, tall and gangly with that awkward teenage energy that made him seem uncomfortable in his own skin. Brittany was 12, quieter and more reserved, but sharp and observant. They were polite enough when they came over. They said hello, sat on the couch, watched TV, and stayed out of my way. I tried to be friendly without overstepping boundaries. I was not trying to be their father. I was just the guy their mom married. They seemed perfectly fine with that arrangement. Everything felt manageable, controlled. I thought I had found a balance that worked for everyone. But about 2 months after the wedding, things began to shift in subtle ways that I did not immediately recognize as warning signs. Diane started mentioning that Kyle and Brittany wanted to spend more time at our place. A typical weekend visit that used to last one night suddenly stretched into 3 days, then 4. The kids started leaving things behind. A jacket draped over the back of a chair. A backpack shoved into the corner of the living room. Clothes piling up near the door. Diane said it was easier than packing everything back and forth every time they visited. I told myself it was not a big deal. I told myself I was being too rigid, too controlling. But deep down I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. My apartment, my carefully organized space, was slowly being taken over. I found myself picking up after them constantly. A bowl left on the coffee table. Shoes scattered in the hallway. Wrappers stuffed between couch cushions. Every time I brought it up to Diane, she brushed it off with the same response. She would smile and say, "They just want to bond with their stepdad," or "give them some time to adjust. They are still getting used to this new situation." I wanted to be understanding. I wanted to be the kind of husband who supported his wife and her children. So I kept my complaints to myself and tried to adapt. 4 months into the marriage, Diane made what seemed like a reasonable request at the time. She asked if we could set up a small corner in the living room for Kyle and Brittany. Just a little space where they could keep their things and feel more at home when they visited. I hesitated. The apartment was already tight on space. But I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to show Diane that I cared about her kids. So I agreed. I thought a corner meant just that. A corner. A small, contained area that would not disrupt the rest of the apartment. I was wrong. Within days, what started as a corner turned into half the living room. A bookshelf appeared out of nowhere. A beanbag chair materialized in the middle of the floor. A small desk for homework was set up against the wall where my reading chair used to sit. My own furniture got pushed to the side, crammed into awkward positions to make room for theirs. The layout of the apartment, the flow that I had spent years perfecting, was completely destroyed. The space no longer felt like mine. It felt like I was living in someone else's home, and I was just a guest who happened to pay the rent. Kyle and Brittany started acting like they owned the place. They would come over and immediately sprawl out on the couch, leaving their shoes wherever they kicked them off. They left dirty dishes in the sink for days. They used my laptop without asking. They rummaged through the fridge and ate my food without replacing it. I found myself constantly cleaning up after them, following them from room to room like a maid in my own apartment. When I brought it up to Diane, she would sigh and give me the same tired response. "They are just kids, Bartholomew. Kids are messy. You need to relax." I understood that kids could be messy. I understood that they were still adjusting. But this was my home. I had lived here for years before any of them showed up. I valued cleanliness and order. Now I was living in chaos, and nobody seemed to care how I felt about it. 6 months after the wedding, the visits became even longer and more frequent. Kyle and Brittany were staying almost every week, sometimes for 5 or 6 days at a time. Diane explained that Graham was going through a rough patch. Work was stressing him out. He was having financial troubles. The kids needed stability, and our apartment could provide that. She said it with such conviction, such certainty, that I felt guilty for even questioning it. I wanted to be compassionate. I wanted to help. But I was losing my own sense of stability in the process. The kids had taken over the bedroom more than once, forcing me to sleep on the couch in my own apartment. I would wake up with a sore back, stiff neck, and a growing sense of resentment that I tried desperately to suppress. Every time I attempted to set a boundary, Diane would cry. She would accuse me of not loving her children. She would say I was being selfish and unsupportive. I hated conflict. I hated seeing her upset. So I stayed silent and endured it. Then Graham started showing up more often. At first it was just to drop off the kids or pick them up. He would knock on the door, exchange a few words with Diane, and leave. But gradually he began lingering. He would come inside, sit in the kitchen, and chat with Diane while I stood awkwardly in the hallway, unsure of what to do with myself. They would laugh together, reminisce about old times, talk about people I did not know. I felt invisible. This was my home, my marriage, my life. And yet I felt like the outsider. I tried to tell Diane how uncomfortable it made me. She dismissed my concerns immediately. She said, "He is just being a good father. You should respect that." I did respect it. But why did it have to happen in my living room? Why did I have to watch my wife laugh with her ex-husband, while I felt like a stranger in my own space? 8 months into the marriage, Kyle and Brittany were practically living with us, full-time. Graham was there almost every evening. He would stay for dinner, watch TV on my couch, and act like he was part of the household. I was cooking for 4 people now. I was buying groceries that fed an entire family I had never agreed to support. My personal space had completely vanished. My laptop, which I needed for work, was constantly being borrowed by Kyle for gaming. Brittany would go through my closet without asking and take my jackets. When I brought it up, Diane would roll her eyes and say, "They are just borrowing. Do not be so uptight about everything." I started working late just to avoid coming home. I would sit in my car in the parking lot after my shift ended, staring at the building, dreading the moment I had to walk through that door. On weekends, I would go to coffee shops and sit there for hours, pretending I had errands to run. Anything to escape the suffocating feeling of being invisible in my own life. My relationship with Diane was crumbling. We argued constantly. She accused me of being selfish, of not caring about her children, of refusing to be part of the family. I tried to explain that I just needed some boundaries, some space, some acknowledgement that my feelings mattered too, but she twisted my words every time. She made me feel like the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the hero. My friends told me I needed to stand up for myself. But every time I tried, Diane would cry and guilt-trip me into backing down. I felt trapped. 10 months into the marriage, everything came to a head. It was a Friday afternoon and I had just finished a major project at work ahead of schedule. My boss told me to take the rest of the day off. I was thrilled. I thought I could finally go home, relax in my own space, maybe watch a movie or just sit in silence for a few hours. But when I opened the door to my apartment, I knew immediately that something was very wrong. There were voices coming from inside. Not just voices. The sound of furniture being moved, boxes scraping against the floor. Laughter. I stepped inside slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. What I saw made my blood run cold. Kyle was in the bedroom pulling clothes out of cardboard boxes and hanging them in my closet. Brittany was in the bathroom arranging toiletries on the counter as if she had lived there her entire life. And Graham, the man who was supposed to be their father and nothing more, was in the living room installing a bookshelf on the wall where my framed concert poster used to hang. There were cardboard boxes stacked everywhere. A new couch sat where mine used to be. A different television, bigger and newer, was mounted on the wall. My furniture, my belongings, my life, were shoved into a corner, half packed in boxes, like they were being discarded. It looked like a completely different apartment. It looked like someone else's home. It looked like I had been erased. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Finally, I managed to choke out the words. "What the hell is going on?" Graham turned around. He was calm, too calm. He wiped his hands on his jeans and shrugged like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh hey, Bartholomew. We are just moving in." I stared at him. "Moving in." He said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like I should have expected this. Like it was already decided. Kyle glanced over from the bedroom, but did not stop unpacking. Brittany did not even look up from the bathroom. They just kept sorting through their things, arranging their lives in my space. Nobody explained. Nobody apologized. They just kept going like I was not even there. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Diane. She answered on the third ring, her voice light and casual. "Hey, what is up? What is up?" I repeated, barely keeping my voice steady. "There are 3 people in our apartment right now, unpacking boxes like they live here. What is going on, Diane?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then she sighed. A deep, frustrated sigh, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I was going to tell you tonight. Tell me what Graham lost his job," she said, her tone immediately shifting to defensive. "He could not keep up with rent. He lost the apartment. The kids have nowhere to go. Bartholomew. They cannot just live on the street. This was the only solution." I felt my chest tighten. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. "The only solution. You moved them into my apartment without even asking me. I thought you would understand," she said, her voice rising. "This is our home. We are a family. I thought you cared about my kids." "This is my apartment," I said, my voice cracking. "My name is on the lease. Mine, not theirs, not Graham's. You cannot just move people in without talking to me first." "Do not be unreasonable," she snapped. "They are just kids. They need stability. I thought you were better than this." I hung up. I could not listen to her anymore. I turned to Graham, who was still standing there watching me with that same calm, unreadable expression. "Get out," I said. He crossed his arms over his chest. "Diane said I could stay. I do not care what Diane said. This is my apartment. You do not have permission to be here. Get out." Graham did not move. He just stood there staring at me like I was the one in the wrong. Kyle stopped unpacking and looked at me like I was some kind of monster. Brittany started crying. The sound of her sobbing filled the apartment, and I felt like the worst person in the world. But I was not backing down. Not this time. Diane came home 20 minutes later. She stormed through the door, her face red with anger. "You are being cruel," she said. "How can you do this to them? How can you be so heartless? How can you do this to me?" I shot back. "You moved 3 people into my apartment without asking. You replaced my furniture. You acted like I did not even exist. This is not our home, Diane. This is my home. And you just gave it away without even asking me." She tried to argue. She tried to guilt me. She cried and yelled and begged. But I was done. I was done being manipulated. I was done being made to feel like the villain for protecting my own space. I called the building manager. I explained the situation calmly and clearly. 3 people were living in my apartment without being on the lease. The manager came up within the hour. He was professional and straightforward. He confirmed that only Diane and I were listed as legal tenants. Graham, Kyle, and Brittany had no legal right to be there. He gave them 24 hours to leave or he would call the police. Graham was furious. He started shoving things back into boxes, muttering under his breath about how unfair this was. Kyle and Brittany cried and called me terrible names. Diane begged me to reconsider, but I refused. They left that night. All 3 of them. They packed up their boxes, loaded them into Graham's car, and drove away. The apartment fell silent. Diane stayed, but she did not speak to me. The air between us was ice cold. The week that followed was unbearable. Diane and I moved around each other like strangers sharing the same space. She refused to talk to me. She slept on the couch and avoided eye contact. She sent me long text messages in the middle of the night, accusing me of destroying her family. She said I was heartless, that I had no compassion, that I never really loved her or her children. I read every message, but I did not respond. I was too exhausted, too angry, too hurt. I knew the marriage was over. There was no coming back from this. I contacted a divorce attorney the following Monday. When I told Diane, she was genuinely shocked. She had not expected me to actually go through with it. She thought I would back down, apologize, beg for forgiveness like I always did. But I was done with that pattern. The attorney confirmed that since we had no shared assets, no joint bank accounts, and had only been married for 10 months, the process would be relatively straightforward. Diane tried to negotiate. She cried. She pleaded. She promised that things would be different, that she would set better boundaries, that her kids would never come over again if I just gave her another chance. But I had heard it all before. I did not believe her anymore. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Diane moved out within 2 weeks of the filing. She took her things and left without much ceremony. She sent me one final message saying I would regret this someday, that I would realize too late what I had lost. I did not respond. I changed the locks the day she left. For the first time in months, I was completely alone in my apartment. It felt strange, quiet, empty, but it also felt like mine again. I spent the next few weeks putting everything back the way it used to be. I moved my furniture back to its original spots. I repainted the walls. I threw out anything that reminded me of that chaotic, suffocating period of my life. Slowly, the apartment started to feel like home again. At first, I felt guilty. I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I should have tried harder to make it work, if I should have been more understanding about Diane's situation. But then I started talking to people, my friends, my coworkers, a therapist I began seeing twice a week. They all said the same thing. I had been manipulated. I had been taken advantage of. Diane had used my kindness, my fear of conflict, and my desire to be a good husband against me. She had pushed boundaries until there were none left. And when I finally stood up for myself, she painted me as the villain. Therapy helped more than I expected. I learned about emotional manipulation and how to recognize it. I learned how to set boundaries without feeling guilty. I learned that protecting my space, my peace, and my well-being was not selfish. It was necessary. It was healthy. It was something I should have done much sooner. I started to rebuild my life from the ground up. I focused on my work and got a promotion 6 months after the divorce. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the marriage. I started exercising again, running in the mornings before work. I went on solo trips to places I had always wanted to visit. I rediscovered who I was, outside of that toxic relationship. 6 months after the divorce, I felt lighter, freer. The apartment was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. I no longer dreaded coming home. I no longer felt like a guest in my own space. I had my life back. I had myself back. Looking back now, I realize that the biggest lesson I learned was about boundaries. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are not signs of coldness or selfishness. They are guidelines that protect your well-being and your sense of self. They are necessary in any healthy relationship. Diane taught me in the hardest way possible that love without respect is not love at all. It is control. It is manipulation. It is a slow erosion of who you are until you do not recognize yourself anymore. Real love does not demand that you sacrifice yourself completely. It does not ask you to give up your peace, your space, or your sense of self. Real love respects who you are and what you need. Real love listens when you say no. I also learned to trust my instincts. From the very beginning, there were signs. Small things that I ignored because I wanted to believe in the relationship. The way Diane dismissed my concerns. The way she guilt-tripped me whenever I tried to set a boundary. The way she prioritized everyone else's needs over mine without ever asking how I felt. I saw those red flags, but I convinced myself they were not important. I told myself I was being too sensitive, too rigid, too controlling. But my instincts were right. I should have listened to them sooner. I should have protected myself before things got so bad. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is say no to someone you love. It feels cruel. It feels selfish. It feels like you are abandoning them when they need you most. But saying yes to yourself, protecting your peace, choosing your own well-being over someone else's demands, that is even more important. That apartment was mine. My name was on the lease. My rules. My space. My peace. And I will never apologize for protecting what was rightfully mine. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you ever been pushed to the edge by someone who claimed to love you? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? Drop a comment below and share your peace story. I would love to hear from you. If this story resonated with you in any way, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is struggling to set boundaries. Someone who feels invisible in their own life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it helps you find the courage to stand up for yourself and protect your own peace. Take care of yourself. You deserve to feel at home in your own life.